So we are going to start a quick line work demonstration, all digitally. So I'm going to call this my skull spot illustration. I'm going to try to keep it to 10 minutes. I want it to be 11 inches high, 14 inches, actually I want it 11 inches wide, 14 inches high by 350 pixels per inch. Good enough resolution to print from. I'm immediately going to make a new layer, so I leave the background as a white layer that gets untouched. Sometimes I'll lock it so that I can't accidentally do things on it. If I try to paint on a locked layer, it will not let me. So I go to this layer. I'm going to just choose default settings, black and white, and use a brush tool. Set the brush to a size I like, a hardness I like, maybe slightly soft, and an opacity I like. I'm going to just try to complete it right out of the gate. So I'm going to put it at 100%, and I'm going to draw a skull. Now, generally, this is how I would do it. I would have a sketch type, and my sketch I might do with a different color. So here's my skull sketch at a lower opacity. Basic shapes, all that good stuff. When you're doing a spot illustration, you really want to pay attention to the outside silhouette. That's why I have a low opacity brush, so I can kind of refine as I go. Looks like a Darth Vader skull. I like that. I can decide whether I want teeth or not. Where are these eyes going to go? Temples. All right, so once I have my sketch, I kind of like the different eyes. Now I can go on top of that with black lines, and I can be cleaner. Whoops, let's change my opacity back to 100. And this is like digital inking, trying to get a refined finish. It's the difference between what's called an animator's line and a sketching line. Whatever you use, you just commit to it. With the tablet, I have sensitivity to pressure with my stylus, so I can make my lines go thick to thin just with how I use my strokes. I'll make the teeth a little thinner, pretty funky looking. Put a crack in one of them. At any time I can turn off my sketch and see how it's going. See what else I want to pick up on. Maybe get some texture here to the upper jaw. And then you might decide as part of your inking that you need what's called full bleed, more areas with shadow. And it's called digital inking because it's just like using a brush filled with ink onto Bristol board. But the thing you can't do with a brush filled with ink that you can do in digital is simply erase. So I'm going to have 100% eraser, hard-edged. And I can refine my inking. Slim down my lines. When I started as a cartoonist, I drew everything in pencil, and then I scanned it in and converted it to look black, and then cleaned it up in the computer. And I realized it's just because I was afraid of using ink. So the computer does all of the strengths and takes care of all the weaknesses of that. You have all of the strength of ink, and you have to be nice and confident, but then you can also correct by just erasing away and fixing. All right, now I think I want to put the jewels in the eyes. little diamond shapes, rubies, for this pirate shirt. And if I think that this is getting too, it's still too clean looking, I can use the eraser to kind of mess with it as well.
You might need a crack in your skull too.
Yeah, you need, and you can always put more texture in. Now here's a great way to do textures. We learned from the fantasy assignment, fantasy landscape. I can always do a texture fill. And there are some I like to use. Let's see. So these are called grunge halftone patterns. Especially helpful with t-shirts. So let me take this one for instance. Overlay it on top. It comes in as a smart layer, so I can stretch it to go over my design. And then I'm simply going to overlay it in different ways until I like what it does. And I can adjust it until it cuts out my image. That one might be a little strong. Let's see. Something like that. Now that it's really roughed out, I can go back in with my black lines and make the spot illustration, dark and shaded where I want it to be. Put the strongest shadows in. So it's up to you whether you want really clean line work or whether you want stylized line work. But we always want to contain our spot illustrations in black lines first. So that they have the versatility we expect. We can also use what are called halftone brushes. We'll talk about some of these halftone uses as we finish yours off to give some shading. But still with just clean black line work. Make everything look a little dirtier. And then why not, let's do one more little thing with black. Regular brush. I'm just going to do this with a different technique actually. I'm going to use my lasso and I'm just going to show some drippiness, coming from it. Drips are so hot right now. Zombies and The Walking Dead, all that good stuff. So I've outlined a shape and now I'm just going to fill that with my paint bucket with black. And I can decide if I want to use it. I can also use certain filters. I have it on its own layer. So I can say, take its opacity down. I can say filter, sketch, halftone pattern. Let me actually fill it with a gray color instead. So keep it at 100%. Select it all. This is what I usually do. Select inverse. And fill it with 50% gray. There's so many ways you can do this though. So now that you have that 50% gray, when I do a halftone pattern filter, I need to be able to set the settings though. So I go to sketch, halftone pattern. Take its contrast down. I get to set kind of the size of the dots and how strong they are. Kind of like that. Then I can always use levels to darken them if I want. And then I can use the eraser to kind of cut out where I don't think it's all that helpful. I tend to overdo things when I first do them. So maybe like that. What do you think?
That's good.
Ready to go? Okay, so now we're going to take this black line work. How do I bring it into Illustrator?
Save it as a PDF.
Yeah, first, just for posterity, I'll save as a PSD for myself with all these layers. But then what I'm going to do is turn off that white background layer and merge these all together. Keep this lighten layer, first merge it with this. Sometimes overlays can be tricky to figure out how to merge correctly. But when in doubt, you can always just flatten everything. Then it will get rid of all the overlays, so everything's flat. And now I want to isolate all the whites. And I simply do that by using the magic wand at a low tolerance with contiguous unchecked, and I select all the white. And then I just delete it. Okay, because this is what we want to bring into Illustrator, just floating black. Okay, then I say File, Save, and I'm going to save it as a PNG to the desktop. Then I have time just to do this. I'm going to open it with Illustrator, and I'm going to use Live Trace to convert it, and I'm not going to do anything else other than that, so that we start with clean vector line work.
So it's just the background, but not the white in the design, or so it's the white?
Yeah, we're just doing the black line work.
Okay.
So everything behind is empty. It's like the leading on stained glass. And then the next demo will be coloring behind it. So it comes into Illustrator, and all I do is immediately live trace it with Simple Trace. And it will convert all of these solid black shapes that I created in Illustrator into vector shapes. I hit expand, and now each of these is an individual vector path. Very grungy looking, very nice. Now I'm going to save that as an EPS file so I can move it back to Photoshop. All right. So now that it's an EPS file, if I open it up with preview, I can see it clearly, and as I zoom in, it will never lose resolution because now it's a clean vector. If I was doing a one-color t-shirt, this is how I would want to do it. Next step is I'm going to open it up in Photoshop and then color behind it for a color version.